to write a difficult verse. Now, there's some that are difficult for theological reasons, and there are some that are just difficult for every conceivable kind of reason. Who is this guy? Who is this man? We wanted to thank him, you know, this kind of thing. Shamgar, who slew 600 Philistines with, for heaven's sakes, an ox goad. And again, everything in this verse is difficult. So we'll look for a variety of things. There's when I did a study of this back in seminary, where did I do this? This must have been in. I always forget. This must have been when I did at Dallas. I wrote 40 pages about Shamgar and looked up everything that I could and ended up relying on primary sources because nobody has written much about him. And you can't imagine why. I mean, just a fascinating character. But the first real problem is his name. You look at the name, Shamgar, and most Hebrew names have a meaning in Hebrew. Okay? So Joshua means deliverer or savior. Oh, okay, great. That means something. Ezekiel means God is my strength. Okay, that's a good name. I like names like that. So you come to Shamgar, and you look at the word Shamgar, and you say, Shamgar. That doesn't mean anything in Hebrew. That's not a Hebrew name. Well, what kind of name is it? This is one of the great problems amongst the commentators, is that they can't agree what name this might be. And I think there's something like 28 different suggestions as to what this name means. And so my opinion is just my opinion. Tim, I'm even worse than you. I mean, your opinion actually has some background to it. You know, my opinion is just one of a whole bunch, right? And I think I'm right, but you know, if somebody comes up with a better argument, I'll sure listen to it. But there are some who believe that this is a combination of two languages. The word Sham in some language or another, I think Akkadian, and Gar in Hebrew means an alien or an outsider. And I'm thinking, okay, well, why, you know, if the guy's name is Shamgar and it's really Shamgar, why did his parents name him Shamgar? If it's a name that means outsider or alien. And if that's what it suggests, how did he get that name? Who imposed that name on him? And I could never come up with a theory that made any sense. There is one commentator, John Garstang, very famous guy. He was the excavator of Lachish back in the 30s. Really important commentary on Joshua and important stuff. John Garstang suggested that Shamgar was an Egyptian sea captain, and that his name was Egyptian. And I've read through his argument. It's an interesting argument, and it's very nice. But the problem is that it ignores Egyptian linguistics. There is no root, there is no hieroglyphic basis in the Egyptian linguistics that would allow us to form a name like Shamgar. In other words, it can't be an Egyptian name for technical reasons. So, what is this? In the Canaanite language of Ugaritic, they have a unique way of forming participles. Okay? In Hebrew, if you want to form a participle, you take a verb and you add an M to the front. Or sometimes you put an infixed O and it works. In the Ugaritic, there are several ways of making participles. One of them is by putting an SH sound on the beginning of a verb form. So we go to the common Semitic verb MGR, which means to farm a plot of ground, or to take care of farm animals. And if you add to that the shin prefix, it makes it a participle, and so Shamgar's name means a farmer. He's a Canaanite. I think very likely Shamgar was a Canaanite farmer, which also explains his ox goad. Again, John Garstang has the most fascinating suggestion that Shamgar is an Egyptian sea captain, and his ship was named the Ox Goad. I'm thinking, how would you, can you imagine an 18th century English warship, the HMS Ox Goad? It doesn't do anything for me. So I think Garstang is wrong about this. I think most of the other scholars are wrong in trying to make this more complicated than it should be. Shamgar is not a Hebrew. He's not a part of Israel, which is why it adds here at the end. And amazingly enough, he also saved Israel. And it tells you a little bit of how far things are going here. The Philistines are a problem because they're too early. We really shouldn't have Philistines anywhere near Israel until around 1200 BC. We're probably 100 years early on these Philistines. What are they doing there? Are they really Philistines? They're obviously organized in a military way. 600 is not merely a nice round number. It also happens to be the precise size of a British regiment back in the day, when in order to control men in the field, you had to shout at them or use trumpets or something like that. With the use of trumpets and voice, the British determined that they could control 600 men, not one more, and of course not one less. And so that's the size of a British regiment, which is interesting. And if that's true, then it's always been true. And it's surprising how often we find military units in groups of 600, because people have always been able to do what people have always been able to do, and that's kind of works out. So 600 Philistines is a unit of Philistines, some kind of unit. Whether the Philistines thought in terms of companies, brigades, regiments, it doesn't really matter. They had a group that could all work together. The word struck down or slew, again, interesting word. I wonder about this, because what I visualize is 600 Philistines and one valiant warrior, standing there. If I was the Philistines, I was going after this one guy, and I had 600 on my side, I'd send about 3 big guys after him from this side, coming, and then send somebody the other direction with a bow and arrow and just shoot him. I mean, the classic aphorism here is, if you find yourself fighting a fair fight, you've done something wrong. The Philistines were not known for fighting fair. They fought effectively, and if that meant, shoot the guy from a distance, well, that's fine, and it wouldn't have bothered them. So this is just, it doesn't ring true that Shamgar in open warfare took on 600 at a time and killed them all right there on the field. That doesn't sound right. Shall we do a little more work? And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of linguistics. What the word here, translated either killed or slew or struck down, means that he defeated them. He bested them, made them run. Those who weren't all bloodied up on the battlefield ran for it. Now, how did he do this? Well, it's going to come back again to who Shamgar is. If he's a Canaanite farmer and he's out standing in his field with his ox goad, okay, what's an ox goad? An ox goad is a necessary tool if you happen to have an ox pulling your plow. An ox is not a handy animal. An ox tends to require encouragement. Okay? So an ox goad is a tool about this high, about 6 feet. It's a stick, fairly heavy stick, with a pointed iron tip. Not so sharply pointed that you're going to wound your ox, but sharp enough to do what you need done. You've got to get his attention, and that's what the goad is for. And you hold it in 2 hands and go ka-whack, and the ox goes, and pulls your plow a little further. Okay? At the other end of the ox goad is a thing shaped like a shovel for doing the necessary things that you need to do around an ox while you're out in the field. Okay, so it's an extraordinarily simple tool. But what if you had access to a way of sharpening everything so that your goad was a little sharper than it really needed to be, and the shovel end could be sharpened up enough to be actually fairly dangerous. And then you do an Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of thing. Okay? Then it would be kind of an interesting weapon. And there's also the opportunity for it to be a subterfuge. So here's a garrison of 600 Philistines, maybe an early wave of Philistines. We need to talk about Philistines just a little bit longer because this gets difficult. The Philistines probably came out of the Greek islands, and it seems to have been a fairly long, drawn-out process. Some associate the origins of the Philistines with the eruption of the volcano we call Santorini in the Aegean Sea. A very interesting thing. You sail right into the caldera of the volcano when you visit there. And when that thing exploded, it destroyed the Minoan civilization, among some others. It led to the development of the Mycenaean civilization. But a lot of people were displaced. Among those was the group that we will eventually call Philistines, but they're originally called themselves the Sea Peoples. And there's related groups of people from the Eastern Mediterranean. They took over what was called the Hittite Empire, pretty much destroyed the Hittite Empire around 1200 BC, after the Hittites had destroyed the Mitanni Empire of northern Mesopotamia. Okay, so all of that is playing out together against these other backdrops. The Sea Peoples came slowly down the eastern coastlands of the Mediterranean. And they took over the area called Lebanon. Those people became the Phoenicians. And they also had an outpost, those Phoenicians had an outpost in North Africa we call Carthage, which is going to end up being really important later on. And they were the same people group. They came farther south and slowly expanded and attempted to take over Egypt. And that happened around 1230 BC. And that's when these Medinet Habu reliefs were made. Big battle. The Egyptians fought the Philistines, or the Sea Peoples, off the coast of Israel. And those Sea Peoples didn't exactly retreat, but they went back. So the Sea Peoples, or the Philistines that we're talking about, are an early wave, an outpost, a garrison, if you will, somewhere along the coast of the Promised Land. And we're not told where or in what situation. Shamgar was a Canaanite farmer who had available to him an ox goad. And every day the garrison commander would send out the standard patrols. You know, he'd pick a squad, so a dozen men, and send them this way, and another goes that way, and one goes inland. And whichever direction Shamgar was, he was out there, out standing in his field next to his ox, and the troop would go by. And as they walked by, he would slowly walk out behind them, maybe whack of one, whack two, whack three, and then go back and stand with his ox. He managed to create such instability and fear that the Philistines finally pulled out. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's my theory and I'm sticking with it. Because the fact is we really don't know. We don't know what to do. We'll see Shamgar mentioned just briefly in chapter 4 in the Deborah and Barak, well not 4, but in 5, when we see the Song of Deborah. She mentions that Shamgar was at work and doing his thing during a very unstable time when there was crime in the streets and mothers couldn't send their kids to the store without worrying about them. That kind of thing is going to come up in chapter 5. So Deborah is about the same time. And we place Deborah and Barak in this somewhat middle period, the early 1200s BC. So Shamgar, fascinating guy. You know, my favorite thing is the idea that he captained a ship called the Ox Goad. No, probably not. Very unlikely, in fact. Okay. You want to ask questions about Shamgar? I think I've asked most of them. He's a fascinating character. We don't know what to do with him. Yeah.
Oh, it just seems like he's a guy who made do with what he had.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
And that's a biblical lesson.
That's yeah. If we're looking for a moral to this story, this is the same as Moses. Moses says, "I'm not a great speaker," and God's answer is, "Look, Moses, take what you've got, and I'll be with you. And it really doesn't matter what you've got. I'll be with you." You know, that kind of swings the pendulum a little more in your direction. So Deborah and Barak is yet another story. What have I got here? Oh, this is a shot looking across the Jezreel Valley, the northern part of Israel. So Haifa will be off to my left and the Jordan River off to my right. The width of Israel at this point is about 35 miles. Just to give you just some slight notion of the size of the nation of Israel? At its narrow point, 35 miles. It's tiny. It's smaller than the Idaho Panhandle by far. Just a teensy little place. If you put, say, Lake Coeur d'Alene at the Dead Sea, and Priest Lake at the Sea of Galilee, that's about right. That's about right. Just a little bitty place. And how scary can a little bitty place like that be? Anyway. This, in the modern world, free Palestine. Well, it was never Palestine, so that's a non-starter. But what do you mean? Out of a world full of 48 countries that are majority Muslim, you can't make room for one little strip of ground 35 miles wide to put a few Jews? What are you telling us? Okay, anyway. That's my politics for the day. Then the sons of Israel. Now we'll get back into the standard story. This is 4 and verse 1. Then the sons of Israel did the evil thing in the eyes of the Lord after Ehud died. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan. Now, Jabin, king of Canaan. Oh, cool. Where have we run into Jabin, the king of Canaan, before? Book of Joshua, around 1400 BC. This has got to be early 1200s BC. 120 years later. Now, unless Jabin was a really long-lived character, there's 2 Jabins. This looks like Henry the Third and Henry the Eighth, and Henry could be. It's more likely it's like the word Pharaoh or Tsar. And the Bible uses Pharaoh like a name because that's really how it was used in the Semitic languages. And this word, Jabin, could be translated the Jabin. It's a different Jabin. Is the Jabin the king of Hatzor? We'll get to Hatzor in a moment. Hatzor is a really, really important place. It's the big city in the north of Israel. It's the head of all those kingdoms. So if there was a coalition of the willing back in Joshua's day, that would be headed up by Hatzor and the Jabin of Hatzor. If there is going to be yet another uprising against the growing power of Israel during the time of Deborah and Barak, it will probably also be led by Jabin, king of Hatzor. So he gave them a significant bit of trouble. This would be in the north. Now, we don't know exactly where Ehud did all of his things, but it was against Moabites and down close to Jericho, so farther south in either Judah or Ephraim area. This will be in the north, and a whole different thing going on. The Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hatzor, and the commander of his army was Sisera. They lived in Hareshet Hagoyim. Okay, that's a lot of detail. What most people would call too much information. I don't really need to know Sisera's name, do I? Well, this is a foreshadowing. We are going to encounter Sisera yet again in this narrative. As we say, the fun is only beginning. Sisera is a great one. And the sons of Israel cried to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots. Okay, and he oppressed the sons of Israel severely for 20 years. Now, Big numbers in the Old Testament are always a problem. We usually don't have a problem with hundreds. 900 iron chariots means 900 chariots reinforced with iron at their respective spots. That's a huge army. This just roughly 100 years after one chariot would have been a big deal. For the Jabin of Hatzor to have amassed an army that included 900 mobile infantry, like mounted in chariots with archers. That was a really big deal. That would be a state-sponsored size of army. So Jabin of Hatzor had apparently done something fairly significant. Now, I don't know how far to push the 900 chariots. I tend to take that number seriously, just as it stands. For those who are wondering, does he believe in any numbers? Yes, I actually do. I would prefer to take the numbers literally when it's possible. The even thousands are often difficult, but this number I think is probably real. That means there was a genuinely significant military expenditure on the part of this northern coalition of Canaanites. They had recovered so thoroughly in 100 years from the conquest under Joshua that it was now possible to field an army that included not only foot soldiers, which is the basis of every army, but the armored quadrant. To field that many chariots, very big deal. And it would, in most cases, be a game changer, no matter what. Okay. So he's got 900 chariots, and he oppressed the sons of Israel severely for 20 years. Okay. So far we've got this standard thing. They did the sin. Now they've got the oppression. Oh, woe is us. And so they begin to call out to the Lord. Okay, he oppressed them. Now Deborah, oh, well, wait a minute. We don't have the call out. Now we're introduced to Deborah. And young Deborah is a mom in Israel. Well, why are we dealing with Deborah instead of some famous other guy? Well, the bottom line is that God doesn't really care who gets the credit. He's looking for the one who can actually do the job. And in this case, God was intending to use Israel's army in a very non-conventional way. There's not exactly a miracle happening here, but it's going to be a very unusual climax to this situation. And one that becomes important when we start looking at other episodes that happen in the same location. It's going to happen in this Jezreel Valley. And I think I've got some other shots of that. Maybe I don't. No. Let's see, what have I got here? Okay. This is at Hatzor, and this was probably the same palace that King Jabin used. This dates to the middle of late bronze, and so it was the palace that was present at the time of Joshua, but there's no indication that that this palace was not rebuilt on the same spot, because we also have as far late as late bronze II and the beginning of Iron Age stuff in this area. So same palace. Jabin just built a new one on top of the ruins after Hatzor was burned by Joshua. And we're going to have the same problem again. So the sons of Israel cried out, and Deborah, a prophetess, wife of Lapidot, was judging Israel at that time. And we've got to ask ourselves the question, why wasn't Lapidot judging Israel at that time? Matter of fact, this is the only place in the Bible, this one verse, is the only place we ever hear of Lapidot. I don't want to build too much on that. It's just that Lapidot was obviously not up to the job. But his wife, Deborah, had the wisdom to call the shots as a judge for Israel. Whoa. Now, Deborah was also a prophetess, which meant she spoke for God, and literally spoke for God. The term prophet in the Old Testament means a mouthpiece, literally the mouthpiece. I don't know if anybody can put up with watching the entire extended version of The Lord of the Rings, the movie. The books didn't have a good visual of the mouth of Sauron, but the movie does. There's nothing but mouth, this ugly, bleeding gums mouth sitting on top of a body. kind of an icky thing. But that's the idea of the prophet. The prophet is little more than a spokesman, a mouthpiece for God. The authority didn't come from Deborah, okay? Let alone Lapidot. The authority came from God. And the people of Israel recognized that. I think that's significant. It's a definite exception to the rule, which is normally God speaks through the male leadership. And I'm not going to say that at this time there were no men in Israel who were up to the task. Some commentators say that that's the point. I don't think that is. What I'm seeing here is that Deborah was uniquely qualified for this particular spot. And what she does here is exactly right. And there's also a prefiguring here because of the conclusion of this particular battle. And I find it fitting and fun all at the same time. I love teaching through this section just because of the way it ends. Anyway, that too is a bit of foreshadowing. So she used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah. By the way, the word Deborah, of course, a Hebrew word, and it means a honeybee. So if you see honeybees flying around in the trees, palm trees, particularly in the springtime, would have honeybees all over the place because of the flowers. Those are Deborahim. Deborah is just one of those little honeybees. Deborah is this sweet little honeybee, buzzing around, doing her work, but carrying a stinger. I like her. I like her story. This is so good. So she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country, which tells us that Ramah and Bethel are close together. The modern name for Ramah is Ramallah. Bethel has to be close to Ramallah. And if we look at the situation on the ground, we find the ancient Near Eastern Tel on the northern side of Ramallah, right on the watershed route. It's very likely that that's Bethel. It's also Yasser Arafat's palace, so can't go there. So here they were, and the people of Israel, the sons of Israel, and I think he used deliberately there, the leadership of the clans of the cities, the families of Israel would all be men, and they would come up to Deborah for her judgment of the various problems. Now she sent, because of Jabin with all his armies, after 20 years, she sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh Naphtali. All right, a little more stuff. Barak is a great old Hebrew name. It means thunder. Okay? War thunder. You know, you get pictures of, you know, F-4, Fu fighter planes roaring out of the. Okay. So Barak, great name. Ehud Barak, another great name for a president or a prime minister of Israel. Wow, what a good name. I like that stuff. You know, there you go. And she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh of Naphtali. Kadesh means a holy place. And so there are lots of Kadeshes in the Bible. Kadesh Barnea is where Israel spent some time. This is Kadesh Naphtali. Naphtali is the western hill country around the Sea of Galilee. Okay, going north all the way up into the Hula Valley and sliding up the hill into the area of what is today the Lebanese border. Kadesh Naphtali is up that hill about 3/4 of the way. There's a flat spot there, bit of a plateau as the limestone eases out toward the crest with the Lebanese border, which is identified with Kadesh Naphtali, and I think that's probably the right place. Kadesh Naphtali is, to say the least, well off the beaten track. I've only been there once, and it was with a very small group because I needed a couple of smaller vehicles, therefore less weight, to be able to get up that hill. The 10-passenger van wouldn't do it. So when, you know, it's a tough place to get to. Barak was out of the loop. It's interesting that he's close enough that Deborah could give him a call. If she was between Bethel and Ramah, that would be in Ephraim. Manasseh is in between, covers the Jezreel Valley, and then the 4 Galilee tribes are north of that. Naphtali is one of the 4 Galilee tribes. So she apparently had some say over people in roughly half of the country, and certainly the area around Hatzor. So she called Barak, behold. She said, behold. I like that the New American Standard Version translates that word, behold. It happens a lot in the Old Testament, and sometimes we just skip it. Some of our modern translations just leave it out because it's unnecessary. And it is, but I like it anyway. The Hebrew is hine. It means simply, see this, behold. I like that. The King James Version popularized that, and I think it's still popular. So she says, behold, the Lord, the God of Israel, has commanded, go and march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun. Okay, 10,000 men. That's probably a very large number, but has to be taken somewhat literally because of the 900 iron chariots. You see the problem I get into? You know, I'm always weighing these numbers, and I don't know. Anyways, a good enough army. I will draw out to you Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his many troops to the river Kishon, and I will give him into your hand. Okay, so God is going to do this then. Let's see if I've got a picture of, well, I should have some pictures. Okay, the iron chariots. Okay, this one actually is iron, but that's not the way they look. Okay. Oh, I should have Mount Tabor. Mount Tabor is a mountain on the northern fringe of the Jezreel Valley in Israel, right on the international trade route, that sticks out like a 38 Ford hubcap. It's got it's kind of a shield-shaped mountain on top, and it's got this. You cannot miss it. As you're driving past, you look up, and here's this big mountain right out in the middle of nowhere, and it's got this church built on top. Roman Catholics have forever understood Mount Tabor as the place of the Transfiguration, and because of that, they put a convenient church right on top, and that makes a good place to stop and get the view from the top of Mount Tabor. I believe the Transfiguration happened farther north. I think one of the spurs of Mount Hermon is most likely. And I do hold the heretical view that the current site of Nimrod's castle is a really good place. But those of you who've been there, you've stopped at Nimrod's castle, wondered, why do they stop here? Well, that's one of the reasons. Because it's really close to Caesarea Philippi. You can walk it, like the apostles did. So, anyway, I will draw out to you Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, with the chariots and troops to the Kishon. Kishon is one of the minor tributaries of the Jordan that flows sort of in the Jezreel Valley. Okay, what I'm saying here is that the Jordan Valley doesn't drain very well. It kind of drains into the Mediterranean, just a little area around Haifa drains into the Mediterranean. All the rest of it tries to drain into the Jordan Valley. So very much of the Jezreel is actually below sea level, and it drains slowly and with great effort into the Jordan. And along the way, it produces swamps, or at the very least, a very shallow water table. So if you take a truck into the Jordan Valley today, let's say you've got a truck full of, a platoon of infantry, and you want them to maneuver out here in the Jezreel Valley. You drive out and you say, oh, we've got to make this more realistic. Let's go off in that field over there. You drive off into the field, you will immediately sink in up to your hubs. The farmers who work that area use specialized equipment to be able to till and harvest and do everything else. If you drive military equipment across there, like a chariot, you'll sink in up to the hubs. There are roads that cross the Jezreel Valley. The most important road goes right past Mount Tabor, and that same road intersects the Mediterranean to Jordan road at the foot of Tel Megiddo. The traditional location for the Mount of Megiddo, or Armageddon, is this Jezreel Valley at the foot of the ridge line where Megiddo sits. And there's some counter arguments to that, but that's very likely. This is not the only battle that we're ever going to see in the Jezreel Valley. The city of Megiddo itself has direct evidence in the layering of 28 destructions from about 3000 BC down to, frankly, General Allenby during the First World War. We found some in some Lee Enfield 303s, cartridges up at the top of that thing in foxholes. Megiddo was a great place to have a battle. If you're going to have a big battle, Napoleon is said to have called the Valley of Megiddo one of the finest battlefields on the planet. Not quite as good as Waterloo, but quite good. So that's the spot we're going to go. And so Barak said to her, if you will go with me, then I will go. But if you'll not go with me, I will not go. What a decisive character. Man among men. So far, Barak is not showing himself to be much of a hero. But she said, if I must, I'll go with you. Nevertheless, the honor shall not be yours on the journey that you're about to take. The Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. And by that, she doesn't mean her, Deborah. It's a whole other woman. And so, Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali, and they all got together with Heber the Kenite. This is verse 11, chapter 4. Heber the Kenite had separated himself from the Kenites, from the sons of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses. How interesting. He was a Kenite, part of the Midianite crowd, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak of Zaananim, which is near Kadesh. Okay, Heber the Kenite. Oh, how interesting. Why do they include that here? He's got to show up in the story. And so they told Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Okay, and there he is, from Mount Tabor, from the top. You can look at the whole valley, and there's the army of Sisera marching across the valley up to their hubs for the most part, and he's just going along. And they saw he's up on that mountain. And so Sisera called together all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the people with him from Harosheth-Hagoyim to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, arise, this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. Okay, so it's an ambush. And the Canaanite chariots are going to have to do some maneuvering. They'll have to get out of road march and into deployed status so they could counter this force. The infantry was going to have to deploy for their fixed position, and the chariots were going to need to move like a pincer to try to cut off this oncoming charge. It takes a while. Back in the day when everything was done on foot or with horses, the battlefield moved relatively slowly. Looking at it from the top of Mount Tabor, you would barely notice the motion, but it would happen. As they're coming around and they're doing this thing. And so it happened. And Deborah said to Barak, arise, this is the day. The Lord has given Sisera. And the Lord has gone before you. So Barak went down. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled on foot. So the army itself was routed. They took off running. Once they realized that their chariots were not effective in the mud, they got out of their chariots and ran for it. And this is what you'll always hope, especially back in the day when going to war meant hand-to-hand combat. You're going to have to face people and cut their heads off. And nobody in their right mind really wants to do that. When push comes to shove, that's what they had to do. And they would much rather that the bad guys run. Everybody was happier with that. So once they started running, they chased them enough to keep them running. Down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico, as we say in another song. And so Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth-Hagoyim, just chased them all the way home. And all of the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword, not even one was left. What a phrase like that usually means is that eventually there was a very great slaughter. and not one was left standing on the field as an effective participant. They either ran away, died, or were badly injured. Most people who were badly injured on a battlefield died. That's the reality. The largest number would have run away. Still, that counts as a defeat. You know, as we say in the business, we'll take that. That's all we really need. He pursued them. Now, Sisera, the commander, fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera. And he said to him, and she said to him, "Oh, you look so tired. Take a break. Take a load off your feet. Why don't you come in and maybe lie down for just a minute? What could it hurt? Your enemies will still be there, guys. Eat. You should come into my house and starve. Turn aside. Do not be afraid." And he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. Oh, all comfy. Tuck you in here. And he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink. I'm thirsty." So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink. Warm milk, just the thing. Tucking in. Aren't they cute when they're sleepy? And he said to her, "Stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and inquires and says, 'Is there anyone here?' you shall say, 'No. Lie for me,' just like Rahab did." But Jael, Heber's wife, mother of her kid, was asking herself, what's a mother to do? What's a mother to do? Took a tent peg. Those of you who have been camping any time in the last 50 years or so recognize a tent peg as a little aluminum thing, about like so, which you can tap into the ground with your fist. So you need a little instruction. An ancient Near Eastern tent peg was designed to hold up a fairly substantial piece of dwelling. A tent peg was usually about that long, about that big around, and kind of a mushroom shape at one end, and a very sharp point at the other. It was heavy. To drive in a tent peg, you used a hammer called a persuader. It was all made of wood with a handle about long and a big piece of oak at the other end, so it was nice and heavy. Oh, some of you are figuring this out. I says, "Oh, isn't he adorable?" Well, time to get to work. What's a mother to do? And the tent peg aimed at the side of his head, and the hammer once over the top. She had to get a nice swing because she's, after all, just a poor little woman. And wham! Probably didn't take two. Through his head into the ground beneath. And the Bible adds, I think quite unnecessarily, and he died. Yeah. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, which way did they go? Which way did they go? I'm here to save the day. Young ladies, stand aside. Have you seen? Oh, yes. Oh, you mean the man with all of the medals and the cherry? Oh, yes, yes, indeed. I've seen him. Why, he's inside now, resting, sort of. And Barak went inside to meet his foe and found him there on the floor. Yeah. Okay, and thus Barak really didn't do much of anything that day. And so God subdued on that day Jabin, king of Canaan, before the sons of Israel. The hand of the sons of Israel pressed heavier and heavier upon Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. And this is the second destruction of the city of Hatzor. We have that in the archaeological record. So this is I like the way this author handles so many of these stories. It's a story told with a serious point. God fights for Israel. God uses willing people to do what he intends to see done. This is all good stuff. And at the same time, he makes us laugh. When Isaac was given his name, he laughs. And who finally has the last laugh? God in his heaven. Didn't I tell you? Next time, count on it. Okay, we'll see you next week. And keep at this for a while longer. God bless.